Welcome to today's podcast episode of The Trust Doctor, Restoring Trust and Enriching Significant Relationships. And we have an absolutely amazing guest today. But before we get started, since I know you're going to love this episode, make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe to the podcast. So, this man that I am about to introduce to you today is one of the reasons why I and you sleep well at night. He is one of the most sought after speakers in the world. Are you ready for this? On risk strategy, counterintelligence, and cyber warfare. Casey is the recognized world leader as a cyber intelligence expert. He's the chairman and CEO of a company called Black Op Partners. Don't Google it now, but Google it after we have this conversation. And it is a global leader in developing strategic risk strategy, and counterintelligence in both the public and the private sector. And I could go on and on about Casey, but you'll hear from him himself. Just one more thing. Listen to who he normally advises. He advises the White House, Congress, the Pentagon, and here come the acronyms, the DOJ, the FBI, the NCSC, and the private sector on counterintelligence and significant threats to freedom, economic, and national security urgently. The emphasis is on the word urgently, affecting every American. I am so excited and so proud to welcome Casey Fleming to today's podcast. Casey, welcome. I am so excited to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Patty.
All right. So you are truly a reason for us to sleep well at night. As we have this conversation, and this will be evergreen, but I think it's important to note that Russia is poised to invade Ukraine. And you know about this stuff. So start with wherever you would like. Give a little bit of your history. Go take it from there.
My history is I was with IBM and founded the IBM Cyber Division. Then I was a strategy executive for Deloitte, did Silicon Valley turnarounds, and then got into this probably slightly over a decade ago. The reason I got into it is because I was appointed to the FBI Academy, and one night they were talking about economic espionage, and I said, wait a minute, these are my customers. Why don't I know about this? And so we commissioned a study and found out that it was much worse than anybody anticipated. One thing I'm going to backtrack on your comment of why we all sleep better at night because of my company. I'm not too sure after this podcast, your audience and your people are going to be sleeping too well. But I'm going to spell things out that every American and everybody in the free world knows about. They just need somebody to point them in the right direction, connect the dots. And that's what I'm going to do for you today.
For our listeners, I just want you to know that was not a tease, what Casey just said. So you absolutely have to stay tuned for the entire podcast. Go ahead.
And my background is, I'm an Iowa paper boy back in the day. So I grew up in Iowa and went to college, high school in St. Louis and college in Texas. So that's kind of my background and who I am. And I'm an American patriot.
Come on, you can give a shout out. You can give a shout out to your alumni. I know where in Texas you went to school.
All right, Texas A&M.
There you go.
So okay. There you go. It's founded as a military school back in the day. So anyway, that's my background, and I'm here for your audience today to get more into the detail of what's really going on in America and the world and the free world as well. So you mentioned Ukraine. Absolutely, you have, this is the run-up like we saw in 1939 to World War II with Germany, Japan, Italy, and Romania all aligned against the free world. You've got the same thing happening today with China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, all very, very tightly aligned. You've got Ukraine with Russia. You've got Taiwan with China. Incidentally, you also saw Hong Kong being taken over by China with barely a whimper. And then you also have potentially North Korea going into South Korea, all within the same, 1-year time frame. So that's really what's at stake right now against the free world. And when I mean that, I mean your freedom, how you handle your day, and the things that you enjoy in life are absolutely hanging in the balance. And it's during your watch. And my purpose of being on Patty's show today is to give you more detail and to connect the dots. So you're more aware of what's going on and so on. So I'm going to talk about things that may seem political. They are not political. When I talk about war and warfare, that rides about 4 levels above any politics. So when I speak something, and you may want to think it's political, it is not political. It is 100% America. It's war footing. And I just explained to you how this is World War III. Absolutely, it's World War III. But the difference between World War II and World War III, that we're now our enemies are operating at the speed of technology and at the stealth of unrestricted hybrid warfare.
When you were saying about for Americans, for the international audience, really, I'm going to say that's synonymous with freedom, for freedom in the world.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Our enemies want to completely replace the world order, completely replace the free world and the economic system that was set forth after World War II. They want to completely replace it with Chinese communism. And it's happening today. But and there's all kinds of evidence and intelligence to show that is a Chinese communist / Marxist movement. Same thing, defund the police, critical race theory, choose your gender, all the wokeism, racism, all these things are Chinese communist movements that are in your living room, on your streets, in our streets, and in our companies. And
okay,
again,
so tell me for the listeners that go right to politics, what can you say where you can quiet that? But it's not politics. Earlier, you said it's 4 levels above. So can you give some evidence that people will understand?
The evidence is so overwhelming that it's impossible to bring it home to people. Here's one. The most significant thing that happened in Canada over the last 25 years was the Freedom Convoy. Did you see any of that on mainstream media on the TV? No, you did not. That is how you're being.
I don't really watch TV.
You're being controlled, and that's how you're being narrated to, and how everything is being culled and compromised. So consider that. So how can you run your company? How can you run your family? How can you run anything when you're only getting propaganda and you're not getting true news and accurate news? So over the last several years, you've seen the news go, I don't ever watch mainstream media. It's not true. Incidentally, you said, how do you make this non-political? Well, I'll tell you, my company, Black Ops Partners, is straight down the middle. Okay. We're Americans. We fight for liberty. We fight for the Constitution, period. The end. We do not take the side of the left. We don't take the side of the right. We're straight down the middle. But when you look at this intelligence that we've looked at, that my company looks at, and I've looked at for the past decade, for 100 hours a week, every day for a decade, then it's intelligence. It's intelligence and evidence. And for anybody who wants to fact check me, here's what I would ask you to do. Go to LinkedIn, go to our company page. It's called Black Ops Partners, and follow that company page. Every day we post about 10 to 12 articles from the printed side of mainstream media. So this is public information, and you can follow what I mean by unrestricted hybrid warfare. And what that is, it's everything. Let me explain what that is. Unrestricted means they follow no rules. In World War II, we followed the Geneva Convention. Today, there
supposedly.
are no rules. Our enemies today, and they've described themselves as our enemies. Even Putin has come out and said, yeah, I'm using information warfare. So what? And
this was going on. You said you've been following this for 12 years or a decade. So this was going on during Trump, going on during Biden. So that would show it's a non-political thing for you.
Oh, absolutely. It's been going on since Bush 43, Obama. I mean, by the way, if it's been going on since 1986, month number 3, which is CCP Nation State Program 863. You can look that up, Program 863. I'll codify it for you. It basically says we're going to lie, cheat, and steal and replace the United States and the free world. And we're going to take our rightful destiny back where we ran the world for 2,000 years. We're going to run it for the next 2,000 years. The last century was the century of humiliation when the Japanese invaded China and so on. So you've got this coming back as a vengeance. You've got CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, coming back as a vengeance. And incidentally, I'll tell you, I don't want to be doing this. I'd rather, be like most Americans and be, in bliss and, hanging with my family and my friends. But
you mean ignorant bliss?
Well, yeah. Yeah, because once you see this, it's absolutely true. So I would say to your listeners, get your family, your friends, your colleagues to follow that company page on LinkedIn. And I guarantee you, nobody's trying to sell you anything. Just follow that. And what I will promise you, you'll page through the first page and you'll become angry. The second page, you page through 6 or 7 articles, you'll be sick. And the third page, you're going to get sick, crawl into the corner and crawl into the fetal position and cry for mommy, because that's what's going on. So even in my position, the level of destruction and weakening towards the United States and the free world is mind-boggling. So you've got to start somewhere. I remember when I started back in the day, over a decade ago, my first month was, they're not doing this. My second month was, they might be doing this, or they could be doing this. And then the third month was, holy cow, they're doing this. And so that's why I commissioned our company to go after this thing. And, the last thing the country needed was another one of 4,000 cybersecurity software companies. We need to understand, if you're at war, which we realized we were, that you have to become intimate with your enemy. And that's what we do. We're very intimate with our enemy, and they describe themselves as our enemy. And they describe themselves as being at war with the United States. And the United States.
What do you mean by intimate with the enemy? I mean, I know sleeping with the enemy, right? So how does that play out in cyberspace?
You have to understand your enemy's strategy and tactics and their intelligence. And you have to use and we create counterintelligence to throw them, to know everything that we can about them, and then also throw them off from achieving their objectives within our economy, our country, and so on. Now, remember, the United States economy the United States private sector, businesses, companies, is our economy. And our economy funds our military and our national security and our government. So, nobody really protects our economy from all, when you see that this company was breached, I mean, most people say, that's unfortunate, grab my Starbucks. And the point is that when a company's been breached, I want everybody to understand that a chunk of your children's future is now gone, whether it's breach A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z. Every breach that you hear about is a breach against your children's future. Don't ever write it off.
Tell us more about that so the listeners can understand, because I'm not even sure I understand what that means.
Okay, so when you hear that, a data breach with these aircraft engines, this aircraft avionics, this aircraft wing design, composite design for the wings, radar assemblies, nose cone assemblies, landing gear. When you see all of those things stolen, and this is going on in every industry. So here's the answer. So the Chinese Communist Party, by the way, there's only one China, and it's completely controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. Okay, so yes, there are lots of innocent Chinese citizens, but they're completely controlled by a dictatorship, a authoritarian regime. The problem that Americans make and our allies in the free world make is that we assume that China is just like us and they have the same values as we do. And they don't. They couldn't be more diametrically opposed. So back to that IP theft.
Right. So we're about the individual and they're very much about the state.
Correct.
Okay.
And the state says, hey, look what we've done for you. Aren't you happy? You need to be happy. And they say, oh, yes, I'm happy. There's a social credit system to manage everybody and to control them. And if you don't do what you're supposed to do, you can't travel, your kids can't go to university, you're not going to get the job you want, and so on. So you have to worship By the way, there's no religion left in China. All religion is banned in China. Certainly the Christian cross, mosques, you name it. The only religion is the religion of the CCP, and to worship the CCP. That's the only religion allowed. In fact, there's Falun Gong there, which are peaceful meditators and meditation practitioners that are banned by the Chinese government. And what's very sick is the Chinese government, the military, and the CCP basically use these Falun Gong practitioners as live human organ transplants. And
Wait,
there's
what?
another
Wait,
word for
what?
that. The live human organ transplants. By the way, there's a documentary that came out 5 years ago, and the name of it is Letter from Masangia, Masangia. So basically, they've killed over anywhere from 2.5 million to 10 million of these Falun Gong practitioners for their organs. And by the way, when I say live human organ transplants, another word for that is murder. And then we all know about the Uyghurs that are being in education slash
Re-education centers,
re-education
right?
camps. Basically, they're torture camps. And the Tibetans that they took over a decade ago, the Tibetans are no longer allowed to practice Buddhism or worship the Dalai Lama and all that type of stuff. So all that, it's completely erasing their heritage and their culture and all that. So back to what I was saying about the theft of intellectual property. Our economy is based on intellectual property, research and development, and that's what powers our economy. And companies get paid for that, and that's how they pay their employees and so on. But when you steal all this information, I just gave you one of literally thousands of examples that there's an aircraft. The Chinese Communist Party just launched the C919. Okay, and that competes with the Boeing 787-800/900. Each one of those Boeing aircraft are worth about $100 million in the US economy. That's $100 million for revenue, profit, jobs, schools, and our way of life. However, when you steal the research and development, which both is two things, it's two elements, two planes, no pun intended. The point is
You have a sense of humor.
There are two planes. In other words, there's time and there's money associated with research and development. So for example, it takes you 7 years to develop that avionics technology, and it takes you $7 billion. Okay, so now the Chinese Communist Party has erased the need for time, 7 years, and the money, 7 billion, and now they're completely on par with you and forget your investment. So, in other words, and what I say to companies, here's another one, microelectronics, semiconductors, microchips. A company called Micron Technology in Boise, Idaho, had 50% of their intellectual property stolen over a weekend. Basically, a plant manager in Taiwan defected to China with their trade secrets. So they went to the FBI and the DOJ, and they said, "Hey, we want our stuff back." And I tell people, well, I'm sure if you write them a nice letter and to the CCP, I'm sure they'll send it back to you.
Wait, you said that?
I say that facetiously.
Tongue in cheek. Okay, yeah.
And so the point is, when you steal all the intellectual property and you erase the time requirement and the money requirement for the research and development, the Chinese Communist Party is now on par. They're selling your product. That's your product to your customers because they have your customer list because they've breached your systems. And this is in every industry and in every company today. That how long can you survive when you've got a country, a nation state, selling your product to your customers at 45 cents on the dollar? Right. And by the way, Micron Technology is it's in the Wall Street Journal. It's public information. I'm not violating any NDAs on that. But here's the other one. There's American Superconductor, energy windmills, the windmills that generate power. Same thing. The Chinese company is called Sinovel, and they stole all the IP that they needed. That if you want your listeners want evidence. Okay. I'm just telling you, this is one of thousands of pieces of evidence.
How do those companies stay afloat then? How do they not end up going bankrupt?
They do. They do.
Oh, okay.
They go bankrupt. So they sold, this company 5 years ago sold $1 billion worth of energy windmills to guess who? China. China took 100 million of those windmills, and they still needed that source code. That's the kernel. That's the inside of the chicken nugget, if you will, on software. And that source code allows you to change the code and make modifications. And so, and it basically, it's the golden jewels of software. Only one of 7 people in the world had that source code. So they found a young 30-year-old partner in Austria. He's a systems engineering manager, whatever, in Austria with one of the partners. And what do those guys operate on? Girls and booze. So it cost them
some things never change.
It cost them 20,500 euros to get that source code, through a relationship, if you will. It's called honeypotting. And alcohol, girls, sex, and USB drives. And so
sounds like James Bond.
It absolutely is. It's 100%. It's real. And that's what I'm trying to tell. I've been doing this over a decade. And like I said, I don't want to be the guy doing this stuff, but when it comes across your desk and you've got kids, it's like somebody's got to step up, and it needs people like me with my skill set. It's not our military. This is, like I said, I'm going to get into that in a second on what unrestricted hybrid warfare is. Basically, it's everything short. How to weaken the United States and the free world, everything short of conventional warfare. And our conventional warfare guys and gals are all trained in World War II technology and methods, which are tanks and planes and guns and bombs and troops and all that kind of stuff. Well, this is everything short of that. This is drug warfare, education warfare, economic warfare, telecommunications warfare, cyber warfare, political warfare. I think I mentioned religious warfare. There's over 100 different methods to weaken the United States. So the Chinese Communist Party.
So it sounds like they go into the fabric of what makes up society, what makes us who we are.
100%. So, I'm here to tell you that racism in the United States is nowhere near as bad as we're taught to think it is through social media. Over 85% of social media in the United States is weaponized disinformation. And there are studies that have been done where Americans believe the 85% nonsense before over believing the actual 14 or 15% truth. And this is all weaponized disinformation that's being sent through social media and all that.
So why do you think that's the case? Why do you think Americans will believe 85% of Americans believe the social media as truth as opposed to disinformation?
Just look at Americans' appetite for reality TV. Okay. Reality TV couldn't get more nutty. And Americans love to watch train wrecks and car wrecks.
And it's human nature. I don't know.
It's human nature. Right? It's human nature. So you're going to look at them in the most audacious crap that comes across social media. And the problem is, I'm not a young man anymore, but I can discern kind of what the truth is. And plus I have at my fingertips all the latest intelligence, but our 14-year-olds don't, our 12-year-olds don't, our college students don't. And so that's where we have to be concerned that these people are all being, our future is being indoctrinated. And I will tell you, TikTok is absolutely diabolical. If any of your family or friends are using TikTok, get the hell off of it. There's a list of China, and my other advice, any technology whatsoever from China, you must consider it to be weaponized against you, your family, and the free world. I'm talking hardware, software, chips, charging cables, all the way down to appliances. If you've got appliances that you have to put in a code to your Wi-Fi, then guess what? All your stuff's being sent back to the Chinese Communist Party into big data databases to be used with current AI and artificial intelligence, and later artificial intelligence as it continues to evolve and get more efficient. So that might be AI on top of data, this year's data, but AI on top of that of today, and then AI 5 years from now. So
I'm just curious, Casey, what kind of appliance? Where are your appliances from?
Anywhere but China.
They are.
Yeah.
If you look around your house, it looks like everything is made in China. It's
It
unbelievable.
is because our government has allowed it, and we as citizens have allowed our government to let it go forward. So my advice to everybody on this call is, number one, get involved. I sent a couple of slides to Patty. I don't know if she'll post, if you'll be able to post those, but you can also go to our website. And I'm not selling anybody. We basically do, so the point is, we do business war games based on counterintelligence. That's how business is being done today. It's a geopolitical world, and your enemy, who's defined themselves as your enemy, dictates how you're going to be doing business in the world. So that's what we do. We do business war games tailored to your company. And I know that's not really this audience. This is my public service announcement through Dr. Patty to help your audience understand really what's going on.
Anything you have to share, we're all in this together. So if people didn't think they were tuning in for that and they're being offered this, I would listen up.
Absolutely. So, I'll just tell you, I'm the last thing from a conspiracy theorist. I've thrown my hefty resume into the fireplace years ago to help fight for our country. You're not hearing this out of mainstream media. You're not hearing this out of other avenues because, quite honestly, they're compromised, as we discussed earlier in this call or in this podcast. So, by the way, that airplane, I was telling, let me finish that thought. That airplane is, you pull out $100 million at a time through a large carrier order of 50 jets or 100 jets. You're pulling out your quality of life for your family and your children and our freedom, by the way. That's how we fund our national security. Here's another one, Nortel. Nortel was the AT&T of Canada, the oldest company in Canada, the largest employer in Canada. It was founded in 1895. At the time, in the year 2000, they were $30 billion. That's a hell of a lot of money back then and in Canada. But there's another company that was just starting up in China. And that company got into through the executive's passwords, through a breach, business email compromise, got into the executives at Nortel. 2004, the IT manager's running up and down the hallways with his hair on fire, and the executives didn't pay any attention to him. By 2008, the company is bankrupt. This is the AT&T of Canada, Nortel. And this other company, and it's a reverse mirror image, right? So you saw Nortel going down, this other company going up. So guess what? In 2008, guess who was $30 billion? And today they're probably about 100. I think the last check was $120 billion. The name of that company is Huawei. So,
Wow.
so the point is, and you can see, I mean, they've got Google knockoffs in China. They've got Amazon knockoffs in China. So the point is, they are systematically unwinding what the United States has built since World War II, which supports our freedom and our free world and democracy. And there are all different methods of weaponizing and weakening the United States. Now, I'll give you, this is a no charge money slide that I'm going to give you guys. You can go to our website, which is blackopspartners.com. Go on to the Insight tab, and there's three boxes at the top. One is unrestricted warfare. And it basically says there's three bubbles, right? In the United States, we only think in terms of you're either at war or you're not. Well, your enemy thinks of this whole big bubble in the center, which is unrestricted hybrid warfare, which is everything short of conventional war. So we have to think like our enemy, right? Which is China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, and they're all tightly coupled against the United States and the free world. There's another slide in there, which is, I call it the money slide. It's taken a whole lot of intelligence to put that slide together, as well as counterintelligence. And it basically says the modern battlefield is everywhere. And so you take that slide and you marry that to following our company page on LinkedIn, and you'll now be very alert to what's going on in your world and how they are systematically dismantling the free world for complete takeover. What that
So
means
what's
is
the
your
objections that you usually hear from people when you share these stories and this type of information? So what are some of the listeners thinking that it's like, how do you quiet those objections?
Well, here's the point. 5 years ago, I used to speak to boards of directors, CEOs, and a third of the critiques would come back and say, this is incredible information. We really need this information. Thank you very much. A third said, this is 5 years ago. Again, 5 years ago. A third said, this is great entertainment. And another third said it was conspiracy theory. Well, let me tell you, the pandemic set all that stuff straight. And in fact, Bob Gates came out on 60 Minutes. Now, Bob Gates was the Secretary of Defense under Obama and Bush 43. Bob Gates came out and said, there's one thing
he wrote a great book. I can't remember the title, but he wrote a great book.
Well, he came out on 60 Minutes about 4 months ago on a Sunday night. And he basically said, Trump did a good thing. And he woke the American people up to the Chinese threat. Another point is the FBI director, Christopher Wray, has been coming out for the past 4 years. And you've never, ever heard of the FBI director coming out and saying this, that China is our most significant threat to the future of the United States. And you would never hear that coming from an FBI director. Never. And he's been repeatedly coming out.
Why would you never hear that from the FBI? That would
because they're
come from the
typically
CIA?
quiet. They're clandestine. They're not going to call out a nation state. Everybody wants to play nice in the sandbox, but it's so bad. It is so bad. He's ringing the alarm bell. The issue is our federal government and our military don't understand the private sector. It's just like me. If you're going to hire me to go in and tell the Air Force that these are the jets we need over the next 10 and 20 and 30 years, and this is what we need to be prepared for, and this is how we're going to train our troops, I'm not qualified to do that. And they're not qualified to advise the private sector. So we have a big mismatch. And that's why my company is one of the companies that actually advise the military, Congress, Pentagon, and which is the military, and government agencies and so on to bridge that gap of what's going on out there. So now today, Patty, is people are very aware. They see this stuff. They saw all this stuff roll out. I will tell you, as one of the guys at the tip of the spear in 2020, when you saw BLM roll out and you saw all these things roll out, I thought that was going to happen over a 6 or 7 year period. And I'm the guy at the tip of the spear. And it rolled out over a 6 or 7 month period. So I was kind of.
So your point for that is what? Other than scary.
That the Chinese Communist Party has infiltrated the United States so much more than even I had understood it to be. And it was carefully orchestrated and so on. So any American, anybody in the free world is going to understand that when the virus came out, and you saw Chinese, just look at the date the virus came out. And by the way, that date keeps moving up. It was late January, then it's early January, then it's December. Now it's I think the last date was October timeframe.
What's for the change? We're getting more information, or is it?
We're getting more information. And, remember, the Chinese Communist Party burnt all of the records. Any doctors that initially came out were silenced, or they were tortured. Yeah. Some of them died. And, we've got evidence that there were 40 mobile crematoriums. So if they only had 3,000 or 6,000 deaths, so the point is, why would you need 40 crematoriums? And they were running all of their 40 mobile crematoriums. And if they were running their regular crematoriums 24/7, 365, then why are they doing that when there's only, say, I think the last number they gave was 6,000
so you think their mortality rate's much higher than they say?
Way higher. That's why they're doing extreme lockdowns now to try to control it as well. So, and if they were global citizens.
Where do you believe the virus started? What's
engineered bioweapon Wuhan lab?
No doubt. You feel no doubt.
No doubt.
Do you think the government has that information?
Absolutely.
And so why are we not sharing that? I hate to ask a naive question.
Because your government, your government is compromised. Okay. You have a lot of level. It absolutely at that level. Your FBI is compromised, your DOJ is compromised. We've got people that are on the payoff. A lot of these people are being promised when this moves over to the Chinese Communist Party takeover, that they'll get a seat in the golden circle. What they need to understand is just look at the history of the CCP, and they're the only people that are going to be in the golden circle in the future are Chinese CCP nationals. And just look at the way that they've treated their own people over the last 70 years since they came in power in 1949. They've been around since 1921. And anybody who is in opposition or not a Chinese national is exterminated. And it's World War II.
And you mean literally exterminated?
Absolutely. They killed 77 million of their own people. Total over the past 70 years. Just look it up. Great famine and so on.
77 million. I can't even get my arms around that number.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to be the guy putting this stuff that I'm telling my fellow Americans now is the time. And we're infiltrated so poorly. Let me give you another example. There were 2 black Ford Fusions driving around Silicon Valley. Nothing special about them, right? Listen.
What's the time frame? What's the time frame?
This is 3 years ago.
Okay.
2 black Ford Fusions driving around Silicon Valley. But on the side of the car, there was an emblem. Do you know what that emblem was? The Chinese Communist Party Ministry of State Security. That's MSS. And they're driving around to keep their people, their Chinese nationals and Chinese Americans, in control. And they're driving around as a police force through Silicon Valley.
So 3 years ago, meaning before
the virus. Yeah.
Well, before we knew about it?
Incidentally, it had nothing to do with the virus at all. However, this is just another example of the infiltration and the subversion that the Chinese Communist Party has done through the United States and the rest of the free world. So, you're at war. Your audience is in a full-blown war. They have been. I'm connecting the dots. I'm giving you their strategy. I'm connecting the dots. I'm letting you know what's really going on. I apologize for the sobering call. I know your people sobering video, but I know your audience will not be sleeping over the weekend as they process this information. But think about that. That's like an FBI car driving around Beijing, 2 black FBI cars with the FBI logo on the side through the streets of Beijing or the streets of Shanghai. Think about that. And
they can do that because we are a free society. Like, we couldn't do that in Beijing.
No.
Because they're not a free society. But in the States, you
That's
can
exactly
drive around with any car, with any logo on the side of your car. I would think.
That's exactly right. But Chinese nationals and Chinese Americans know what the hell that emblem is. And that means we're watching you and you better stay in line. So we stopped them. The FBI stopped them and ended that pretty as soon as we found out about it. But literally, there are thousands and thousands. I mean, they're at the peak in 2018, there were 405,000 Chinese student spies at US universities. So when you're in China,
about that, because I remember, I vaguely remember something about that. And then we sent them home. What was going on there?
We sent a few home that we kind of targeted and scrubbed and said, these are probably PLA officers disguised as graduate students. That's
PLA stands for what?
People's Liberation Army. There's a key differentiator. The PLA, People's Liberation Army, is just like the American Army, except for the fact the American Army is only designed to protect the Constitution and the people. The PLA, their only job is to protect the CCP and to keep them in power. So, we ushered a few out, nowhere near what we needed to. But you have to understand, when you're raised in China, when you leave the country, you have to check out of your local police station. Only it's not a police station; it's a government station. Okay, and when you check out, where are you going? what department? Okay, you're going over to this university, you're going to do this. Okay, you're an undergrad. Okay, check in about every 6 months. If you're a graduate student, you need to be checking in every 30 days and tell us what access you have to intellectual property development, research, and then we're going to tell you how to get in and all that. So the point is, every Chinese citizen, where it's a Chinese national from China going to university or work in US companies or US agencies or US military, they are all considered assets by the Chinese Communist Party. Just
now,
like
you use the word every. Do you mean every?
I mean, every Chinese citizen, every is considered an asset in a totalitarian communist regime. They
so
are
a
considered
17-year-old kid comes here.
Uh-huh.
He has the tools and the wherewithal to be hacking, spying, whatever word you want to use.
They are considered assets. So in other words, if the CCP deems that you're in a position to get information to help the country, to help the nation state, then you will be called upon to do your duty, or we're going to kill you, or we're going to educate your family, train your family. That's torture. So no, I'm not saying that every 17-year-old, but if a 17-year-old says, hey, look, I got this Cush research job. I'm helping this Cush PhD as an undergraduate 17-year-old student. But I guarantee you, if he's a 22-year-old graduate student, he's absolutely being called upon by the CCP.
So when they come over, Casey, in their mind's eye, the individual, do they think they are coming over for education and then the state tells them otherwise?
Well, they're absolutely coming over for education. The United States and the Brits still have the best college education in the world still. So they're coming over, number one, for education. But oh, by the way, you have an extracurricular requirement to
kill two birds with one stone.
Yeah, you have an extracurricular requirement to support your nation. It's a duty to spy. When you're a Chinese citizen, it's your duty to spy. It is your duty to spy for your country.
You know that. You're raised that way.
100%. And to copy and to steal and to pirate. You're taught the propaganda. And they all have apps on their phones to worship Chairman Xi and to worship the Chinese Communist Party. And they have that. And the more you look at that app and your family looks at that app, then your social credit score goes up. Okay. And you get to do cool things in China, like you get to travel for vacation. You might even get to be able first class. But if you don't worship the app enough and you don't do cool things for the CC, or you posted something that they didn't like, then your social credit score goes down to the point where you cannot travel either on trains or any kind of public travel, aircraft, trains. Your kids can't go to university. They can't go to private school. They can't go to this. They can't go to that. So what Americans need to understand immediately, that we are at war, in a full-blown war. It's a war that we're not trained in. That's what this podcast is about, to give you your first level of training. And to share this podcast with everybody.
Which is to be aware.
Raise your awareness, so it's on your watch. It's on your watch for yourself if you don't have kids. If you have kids and grandkids, it's on your watch today. So I don't care what you've done in the past. I don't care how big your bank account is. The world is a very different place than you think it was, or where you think it is today. And I urge anyone that feels that I'm speaking with a forked tongue to fact check me by going on our.
You're allowed to say that anymore.
I can say forked tongue. So, but that's what this is all about. It's, we've got all this politically correct wokeism and everybody. It's to hold everybody back so we can continue to fight each other and erode.
Dividing the old war strategy, divide and conquer.
Well, absolutely. Think about it. Religion is being, it's horrible to be Christian in the United States now. You can't be Catholic. They're burning churches. Christmas doesn't exist anymore. Schools are teaching totally different. You can't say they're teaching critical race theory. They're teaching, you can choose, little boys, you can choose your gender. And if you, oh, then you're a racist, or you're this or that. And so all this stuff that's coming out, you would never imagine, as all of us, when we were children or when we were in college, we would never imagine that this would ever go on in our country. And that's why I say this is happening on your watch. And that's
However,
why.
what you just said earlier, though, my understanding and the little that I do know is that with the school curriculum, from what I've heard, this didn't just happen overnight, right? So this has been going on for quite some time. Why are we just seeing the fruits of the labor now, if you will?
It's been going on under the radar for quite some time.
Right.
It all came out during the pandemic, and part of this whole release mechanism by the Chinese Communist Party and their supporters in the United States.
What do you mean by release mechanism? What do you mean?
Well, it's the release strategy. So in other words, let's use this pandemic to cloak what we're really doing over here. And if you look at Chinese aggression, as far as incursions into India, South China Sea, Australia, global fishing, where they're just pulling up everything out of the oceans off the coast of South America, Galapagos Islands, and that kind of stuff. I mean, you're looking at all this Chinese aggression, and all this is happening while the world was trying to put out or put down the pandemic. And go back and look at the news, go back and look at our postings on our company page on LinkedIn, and you'll see all that stuff. I mean, they're creating their own internet to shut ours down. They're creating their own GPS system to shut ours down. I mean, they're replacing absolutely everything that the United States and the free world has put forth to completely replace the United States and the free world. So that's what I want your audience to understand. It's serious. I'm sorry that, I've kind of ruined people's weekend over this, but this is really what's going on. And I'm one of the few people that'll come out and tell you that this is absolutely the truth. And like I said, please fact check me if there's any doubt. And go through those articles.
So let me ask you a question, Casey. In all seriousness, do you have bodyguards? Like, do you need personal security?
Yeah, I do.
Like right now around your home, or the men outside with sunglasses on?
I'm not going to tell you what we do, but yeah, we've got protection. So
how does your family deal with that? I know you have a son and a daughter. How did they handle that?
They know that this is what dad does, and dad's a warrior, and dad, it's on dad's watch, and dad's one of the guys that's doing something about it. And other people will just look the other way and they'll say, hey, it's somebody else's problem. And what I'm saying is the problem is so big, it isn't somebody else's problem. And the problem, we've got so much infiltration and subversion in the United States that this is going to take a grassroots effort to take
like in Canada, like what's going on now.
Yeah, I mean,
Canadian
because people like you and I, Patty, and your audience, and basically the entire mainstream America is waking up to the fact that there's something very nefarious going on against our rights and our freedom. And I told you, I'm straight down the middle. Okay. I identify with the left and I identify with the right. Okay. So we're straight down the middle. But my point is, when we're talking about freedom, and I think the left and the right can agree that we all want the same thing. We want a better life for our children, period. And if we can all agree to that, then that's what we're talking about. And that's why, and when you're talking war, in other words, that they want to take over your country and put your children into manufacturing plants 7 days a week, 15-hour days, and put your children in manufacturing plants to support the Chinese economy, that's what we're talking about. Well, what does this mean?
Is that what they do?
100%. And if you doubt that, look what they did to the Tibetans, what they've done to the Falun Gong. They only killed them and took their organs and put the rest of them in internment camps. And then you look at what they're doing to the Uyghurs. You have to understand, from a Chinese perspective, a Chinese communist perspective, they believe that they have the superior race. And they're creating a superior
that sounds familiar,
race.
very scarily so.
There's no question. There was a 60 Minutes piece that came out about a year and a half ago from the then current national counterintelligence executive. His name's Bill Evanina, great guy. And all of our counterintelligence organizations rolled up to this guy, the national counterintelligence executive. That position exists because after 9/11, they had a consulting company come in and they said, you know what, we had the intelligence if we only just talked to each other, and it rolled up to the single person. So they created this position called the National Counterintelligence Executive. Anyway, he came out on 60 Minutes about, I think, a year and a half ago, Bill Evanina. And he displayed how that the Chinese Communist Party has infiltrated and data breached these DNA databases. So they know, so they can
DNA, like
DNA,
DNA?
you know, hey, for Christmas, I'm going to give you a Christmas present, and we're going to swab your saliva, and we're going to tell you that you're 2% Nordic and 7% British and all that kind of stuff, right? So several of those companies lost 100% of their data.
Wait, are you talking about 23andMe?
Yes, I am.
That exact company.
And there are other ones that I'm talking about, those type of DNA companies. I'm not going to name those specifically, but companies like 23 and you have your people do their own. All this stuff is Googleable, okay? And several of these DNA companies, these databases, have been taken over by the Chinese Communist Party for military action and hybrid warfare action against the American people, men, women, and children.
Maybe I'm slow. So let's say China has your DNA and my DNA. What on God's green earth are they going to do with that?
They manufacture.
Because Lord knows you don't want to make another one of me.
China and the Chinese Communist Party manufactures over 90% of our pharmaceuticals for the United States and the free world. They manufacture 100% of our antibiotics. But it also says they can create vaccines to inoculate their own people against certain, that in our DNA that Americans, because of our heritage and so on, may react to certain viruses.
Sure.
And they can inoculate their population against those viruses and so on. Yes, that's called bioweapons and biowarfare. I don't want to be, I'm telling your audience, I'm telling you, Patty, I don't want to be the guy. I don't want to be telling you this stuff, but I'm telling you where to look for this stuff and to wake up and smell the coffee. This is going on under your nose. You all know it's going on under your noses. You just needed somebody to tell you the truth, somebody to point you in the right direction. And that's what this podcast is about.
Yeah. What you're saying is that when I consult with companies and there's a toxic culture and I report that back to the execs, they look at me like, and I'm like, you all know it. You just don't hear anybody say it.
Right.
So now what are you going to do about it?
Right.
All right. So let me try to look for a silver lining here. I'll try. You can smile, Casey. It's okay. And by the way, for the listeners, I heard Casey pretty much say what he's sharing with us now at a conference. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to have this man on my podcast. So thank you. What are the chances that and I understand it is for, like you said, the Chinese don't live in the West, right? So they don't understand our mindset. Most of us have not lived in China. I've traveled extensively. I've never been to China. It's not even on my bucket list. I don't like fish. I don't know what I would eat if I was there. So, but it's hard for Americans to embrace that that the Chinese do not have the freedoms that we have, right? Like we were just watching, this podcast is being done during the Olympics. And there was an American, I think she was a 15-year-old American that gave up her American citizenship and is skating for China. And she ended up doing terribly. And I'm not passing judgment. I'm just stating the facts. I'm petrified for this young girl.
Absolutely.
I don't know if she understands. This is not America where you come home and you go on with your life. And maybe you write a book, you can become a motivational speaker. It ends out all good. You just failed on a world stage for China.
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to be pretty, whatever that means, right? So Americans, we don't, even as I say that, I don't know if I really understand that, right? Because for someone like me, if I wasn't born in this country, given where my background, I had a loving family, all that good stuff, but we weren't wealthy by any stretch of the imagination. First generation that went to college. Any other country in the world, including England, any other country in the world, I'd be in somebody's basement folding laundry. Now, maybe some people would have been happy about that, but that would not have made me happy. And the only reason why I am where I am today, talking to someone like you were a paper boy. Maybe you would have been shining somebody's shoes. I don't know. But the opportunities that this country allows is unprecedented throughout history. Yes, I will wave that flag. I will take it to my grave. Prove me otherwise. And again, not one party over the other, just American. My point to you is it possible, even though I know I'm asking this question with an American mindset, is it possible that within China, there will be an underground uprising, right? Like the French Revolution only had the royalty for forever, right? And don't want to get into other countries like that. But is it possible that it's not as stark as you're presenting it?
It is absolutely as stark as I'm presenting.
Let me run down.
To the extent, and here's the point. I mean, there was a famous female tennis star that outed, this is like 3 months ago, outed a CCP party member.
Like sexual harassment or something, right?
On sexual harassment, and I think even rape charges and that kind of stuff. And she was nowhere to be found for the longest time.
Is she alive, by the way? Is she alive?
I don't know.
We don't know, right? They showed videos, but we don't know how old they are.
And we see the videos, but we don't know if they are from a year ago or right after her capture or whatever. So here's the point. When you run a totalitarian regime and a communist totalitarian regime, it's all about power and control. And so when they find out that somebody has said something negative about the party, they've got to snuff it out in a minute. And at the same time, they want to show people this is what happens to you if you speak out against the party. Mm-hmm. So, your concerns over the 15-year-old are absolutely warranted. And you have to understand, it's not like the United States. There is no free speech. And in fact, they've got the great Chinese firewall that you can, and one of them actually came out, one of the Olympic athletes came out, the Chinese American that grew up in born and raised and grew up in the United States. And I think she skied for China, which is the CCP. Right. She came out like last week and said, hey, it's easy, man. You can just download a VPN and you can, do whatever you want on the internet in China. And they went ballistic. And they got a hold of any video they possibly could. They made sure it was not published in China and so on. So you have to understand a totalitarian regime, non-democratic, and Chinese communist regime, authoritarian, is based on 100% power and control. And so they've got to control.
Back to the people, though. I'm going to go back to the people. Okay. So just play along with me. The American Revolution, before it happened, and as it was happening, people would have sworn it was impossible. We went against an empire that ruled the world. I mean, we were a ragtag team. I mean, people don't realize the miracle of this country. And when you read it, there were so many steps along the way where we could have lost. And we had great leaders like a George Washington that was not perfect as a man by any stretch of the imagination. But here we are today. So the human spirit, though, what I'm asking you is, can the human spirit in China at some level rise up? Yes.
However, there are
I knew that was coming.
There are, you're not going to get it all. You're not going to have everything you want, Patty. There are 1.4 billion Chinese people. There's about 350 CCP members that are at the very, very top. The CCP is nothing more than a mafia organization, a corrupt mafia organization with several families at the core and then other families outside of that circle in tier 2 and more families tier 3 and so on. So yes, there could be an uprising with the Chinese people, but here's the point: the Chinese Communist Party has been taking care of them pretty well. If you ask the average Chinese person, "Is your life better in the last 10 years?" They'll say, "Oh, hell yeah." So why would we?
Wait,
Why would we have an
is it,
uprising?
or they're conditioned to say it is?
No, their quality of life. Most of the Chinese people that most of the Chinese people that are in the circles that matter to the CCP, their lives have improved and they do have a much better quality of life. And the point is, they're going to have a much better quality of life as soon as they remove the United States out of the power position. And the other thing to remember is over 60% of the Chinese people, that's 1.4 billion, are under the poverty line. So there's 60% of those.
That's my point. Okay, so that's my
Yeah.
point. Those 60%, that's where I'm asking you, can the human spirit arise and overthrow, or whatever the right word would be, just like the early Americans did?
They can, however, they're under complete control. Their internet is completely controlled. Their apps are completely controlled. All communications are controlled. They have a social network system. They've got almost 1 billion cameras throughout China that are using facial recognition to see where you are, who you are, what you're doing, aligned with GPS and artificial intelligence.
And who
and all that.
monitors all that? There's so many people. How is that all monitored?
Through massive computers that
AI?
Oh yeah, artificial intelligence that they stole from Silicon Valley. And by the way, those energy windmills I talked about, that's 100% Silicon Valley, United States. Now 70% of those windmills are sourced in China. Solar panels for energy, created in Silicon Valley, 100%. Now 100% of solar panels are manufactured in China. So you look at that and those industries are being completely
Did you say
removed.
100% of solar panels?
100% of solar panels are manufactured in China.
So Elon Musk, and I will give you full disclosure, I am not a worshiper of any human at all, by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think Elon Musk, I bring him up all the time because his whole growth mindset, he's a genius. I'm not saying he's perfect. I am not beyond believing if he wants to have a colony on Jupiter, we'll have that in his lifetime if he's not, I don't know, stunted. But you're starting to make a smile. What's your thought on Elon Musk and how he's doing business in China and solar panels? And help me out here.
Every company doing business in China is being used.
But aren't so many of them?
Yeah, but here's the point. That's what's wrong with our society, that we only think in terms of quarters. If you're a CEO of a Fortune 1000 company or an Elon Musk, you're only thinking about business this year in quarters because of our stock markets and our earnings and so on. So that's all you're thinking about. So Elon Musk wants to put a plant in China to manufacture Tesla Musk cars. And they'll do that for 2 or 3 years until they suck up every bit of intellectual property. And then they're going to say, get the hell out.
But I thought he gave it to them. I thought he said
That's what happened. That's what happened. They squeezed him and he said, screw it. I'm going to leave China because electric cars are the future of all cars. Mm-hmm. And China's going to dominate that industry. And they said, listen, they squeezed him. They had him put a plant in there with a lab, by the way. And once they have all the intellectual property and all the processes to manufacture everything they need from a Tesla perspective, now they have Tesla's way to do business, manufacturing processes, people, management, pricing, everything that they need. It's like, hey, they kept squeezing him. He says, screw it. It's not worth your regulations and all that. So they spanked Elon Musk and sent him out, and he quit and took and left his toys there and went back to the United States.
What about the solar panels? What about his solar panel company?
I don't have the detail on where his solar panels are manufactured. I would guess that they're manufactured in China, but I'm talking about the traditional solar panels that you use on roofs and so on. Now he's got roofing tiles that are solar panels. Mm-hmm. I don't know where those are manufactured, but I will tell you the rank and file solar panels are all manufactured in China.
So we are so vulnerable to China for, if anything, like the whole antibiotics things and the medications, that are made there. But to your point, we do all the R&D. So we spend all the money and then they steal it. So because we're a free country, we can't tell, and nor do I want to tell companies where they can do business. So what is the wake-up call?
Well, I would argue with you on that point, even though I adore you, Patty. But
no, please,
point.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
When you're at war,
okay,
we can dictate where the hell you're going to manufacture your stuff. Okay.
Okay. So then why don't we do it? Okay.
We should. And that's what it's what this video is all about. Start to wake up your audience and to have this video go viral like many of them do, and say, hey, look, this is going to take a grassroots effort. And I underscore peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to take a grassroots effort for everybody to align and say, listen, we're not going to buy anything from China anymore because they've clearly marked that they're our enemy. The same thing with Russia. They're clearly our enemy, and they want to defeat and dismantle and take over the United States and our children. And so we're not going to buy stuff from, as a consumer, I'm not going to buy stuff from China anymore. I'm going to demand Jeff Bezos with Amazon. You have to list where these, on every product on your website and on every other website, you have to list where it's manufactured from, and you have to consciously make a decision to buy from China, because all you're doing when we buy things from China, from your favorite retailer, Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, Amazon, all you're doing is accelerating the knife across the throat of your children. You're making your enemy more powerful. And he's using all these methods against you. And there are methods, but they're unwinding absolutely everything they possibly can. So you have to understand, our economy is based on intellectual property. So we have to, and we can win. We're
the innovators. We're the best entrepreneurs in the world.
We can win by out innovating China. But the thing is, we've got to protect that IP, and we got to stop doing business with China, and we have to stop building their economy, which builds their military against us and builds their economy and sucks the life out of our economy and the future of our children. So it's going to take a grassroots effort. I advise your audience, don't buy China anymore. Demand that Amazon and every company say where that product is manufactured. So we have a conscious choice to buy made in the USA, or at least made in one of our allied nations. Lithuania and Australia are the canary in the coal mine that China is pressuring the hell out of right now. Lithuania is the canary, and so is Australia. I've been buying Australian wine, Shiraz wine. That's all I'll drink to help my brothers down there in Australia. You have to understand, it's a world war, and it's happening underneath our eyes and underneath our feet and in our families every day, while we just stay busy with the Super Bowl. And we stay busy thinking that we're doing, good things. And it's the world that we've always known and we grew up in, and it's always going to be that way. Well, I got news for you. It's not that way now. And I hopefully I've enlightened your audience.
All right. One more question. One more question.
Sure.
Well, actually 3 more, but one more question on the topic. As we speak, right? Yeah, we have Russia poised on the Ukrainian border. I think you and I, if we were betting, we're betting that he's going to invade, but he could be posturing. Who knows? Most people think of war as we see that with Russia and the troops and the uniforms and the guns. That is old school war, right?
Yep.
How do you get people to realize the invisible war of cybersecurity? That, I think, is the nut that you have to crack. Because if people can't see it, it's like, what is it? Carbon monoxide. It kills, it's lethal, right? But you don't see it, you don't smell it, you can't taste it or touch it. So how can you help people understand that? The cyber? Well,
cyber is just one of over 100 different methods of unrestricted hybrid warfare. Cyber is just one, but cyber is kind of a two-way threat. You steal IP through cyber, right? To weaken the economy and power your own economy, which also weaken the military and power your military with military secrets and all that. So it's done to steal intellectual property, and then also to hobble or constrain your enemy, whether it's going into their grid or whether it is weaponized disinformation on social media, whether it's crippling banking systems or hospitals. All that stuff is right there. So if we go to, all this is done in different stages, right? Stage one is cyber warfare. Stage two is, more pressure. Stage three is more pressure. And the last stage is conventional warfare. By the way, I've got to put one more thing in. I wanted to say this earlier. The number one killer today of Americans is fentanyl.
It's horrible.
The number one manufacturing city in the world for fentanyl, Wuhan, China. They ship and they press these pills that look identical to Valium, to Xanax, to Percocet, you name it. And they ship those pills over to the west coast of Mexico, to the main port there called Michoacan. And there are 7 drug cartels that have an absolute efficient distribution network through North America and then all the way over to Europe as well. And they also help, and the Mexican drug cartels also help launder money for the Chinese Communist Party. So that's called drug warfare. And there's numerous different examples of drug warfare as well. So people say, show me the evidence. Show me. I'm just Google everything I'm telling you, Google it. But anyway, I want to put that in there. I know that was off subject, but I want to put that in.
Well, you had said earlier, though, that most of our drugs are made in China. Now, I'm in Stamford, Connecticut, and the company that was taken to task for the opioid, I'm forgetting, was right down the road. Purdue Pharma. Right. So they have the contracts and it's made in China. Is that the connection there?
I can't speak to specific.
Well, no, not a specific company, but the pharmaceutical companies here have them, the opioid, they're made there.
Absolutely. But China says, hey, look, let's weaken their society. How devastating. I will tell you, in my personal network, in my personal Casey network, in the last 100 days, I know of 5 young adults aged 21 to 25 that are dead because they took one pill. They took a Xanax, or they took a Percocet, or they took a Valium.
Wow.
And they're dead because they thought they were just going to get a quick high before they went to a date or a show or a party or whatever. Mm-hmm. And they're dead. And that is 5 in my network, and they're 21 to 25-year-olds. So, and think about that. If your son or daughter that's 21 to 20, and by the way, it's happening to high school kids and football players and all that, cheerleaders and geeks and nerds and stoners and everybody else.
It knows no bounds. It knows no bounds.
No, but here's the point. How devastating, how strong is your family going to be after they just lost somebody to an overdose? How strong is your family going to be over the next 5 years and over the next 10 years when they suffer that type of crisis in your family? That's the weakening I'm talking about. That's the nefarious, that there's a word for it. And the word is diabolical. So when you buy that Chinese product, when you think about China, think about the word diabolical, and you will be zeroed in. I don't want to say that. I love traveling the world. I love sampling everybody's cultures. I'm the most respectful American on the road. I've been traveling different countries, continents for 4 decades.
Yeah.
So I love the world. Okay. But you have to call a spade when it walks like a duck, sounds like a duck, looks like a duck, tastes like a duck, it's a duck. And that's what I'm talking about here. So remember, I spent a lot of time on the Chinese Communist Party. What I say, they say, Casey, why do you talk so much about the Chinese Communist Party, not Russia, Iran, North Korea? And the reason I say that is because Russia has the economy of the state of Texas. And they're having their own set of problems and so on. And Putin is an ex-spy with the KGB, so he's doing a lot of positioning. China, we created China. We created that monster. And you've heard the 800-pound gorilla. Mm-hmm. I say China is the 3,200-pound gorilla. And after a decade of doing this, it's a 3,200-pound gorilla. And the Chinese people have a saying, be careful raising a baby tiger. One day it will grow up and eat you. So that's my story, Miss Patty, Dr. Patty.
There you go. And you're sticking to it. All
Yes,
right.
ma'am.
So here's my question.
Yeah.
Two more questions. What is the one most important thing you've learned in your life that you want to share with everybody? One.
To be the best, it only takes another 10%. All the other sheep that are out there working, they think they're working hard and so on, but to be the best takes like another 10 or 20%, not much more. And I'll do second to that, have a code that you live your life by and honor that code to yourself. And that code is much stronger and better than anybody else's code, whether it's your family, your friends, your employer, and all that. Just live to your code, which should be a couple of levels higher than anybody else's expectations of you.
So character, integrity above
Yeah,
all.
oh,
else,
absolutely.
And expect
Absolutely.
more from yourself than anybody else. All right.
100%.
Here's my last question. And I'm going in one of two ways. I have to decide on the fly. All right, here we go. If you could speak to any spy throughout history, who would you want to talk to and why?
I'd say Putin.
Oh, okay. History, though. You could go back to okay. Putin.
I'd say Putin.
Why?
Because I'm more, history has a bearing on the current life and the current world. History does.
He who doesn't know history is bound to repeat it.
Right. So history does have a place, but it's the current world, and the current world is moving faster than anybody can ever imagine. As I mentioned, it's moving at the speed of technology and the stealth of hybrid warfare. So it's a very different world that we're living in right now. We never had technology in the past that we had to deal with, and technology is brilliant. It's incredible. It's at the speed of light, but it's also scary. Every piece of technology has a double-edged sword. There's a good side, a productive, fun side, but there's also an evil side, a dark side to that technology. So I'd like to talk to Putin, see what's going on in his head, or even Chairman Xi. Remember, he's not a president. Presidents are elected democratic officials. He's not a president. I correct people when they say President Xi. I'd like to talk to Xi and say, what's going on? And at the end, I'd like to stand up and tell him, I'm coming for you.
Hang on, one more second. I got to ask this. So what's with his sister? Doesn't he have a sister that's like always there with him? What's her gig?
Who?
The chairman, Mao.
Chairman Xi Jinping. No, I think you're talking about the dictator of North Korea. He's got the sister.
Oh, right. Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, Kim Jong-un has his sisters always around saying, "Look at me, look at me."
Yeah, what's that about?
I think it could be succession planning, something like that.
A woman?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, she's in a very powerful position in North Korea.
Okay. All right. So we know your Black Ops partner. Where can people learn more about you?
Website, Black Ops Partners with an S.com. And so we have partners. We have spy partners, intelligence partners, client partners, employee partners, and so on. So that's why it's partners. Black Ops is because, your enemy is doing really bad things to you. You need to know about them and be prepared. So it's unconventional of what's going on today. That's why Black Ops. And then the other thing is, I can't emphasize enough, go to LinkedIn, go and dial in Black Ops Partners company page and follow that, and have your family, friends, colleagues follow that as well, because it's the truth. And again, nobody's going to sell you anything, I guarantee you. But we're the only guys that I know of that connect the dots and show this to you. So when you're saying, and you need that, you need to be educated and you need to come up to speed on this. And when you look at those articles, you're going to go, oh my God, I get it now. I didn't get it. I didn't know how deep this was and how serious this was. When you look at those articles, you're now going to be, you're a deputy. I'm deputizing you when you follow that company page on LinkedIn. Again, it's not a sales thing. We're not doing it to sell you, and nobody's going to contact you. But again, what we also do, Patty, what we just described, we're not going we can't change people's minds in the business world. We know we focus on protecting our economy. A PowerPoint's not going to change behavior. A webcast is not going to change behavior. But what we do is we take your company, your people, your products, your market, your supply chain. We put your butt in a seat for 2 days and we make you fight for your company. And we use what they're called scenarios or injects. And we put this whole conversation, what I just told you about, the methods and the scenarios by your adversaries. That's the world you're fighting in today. Nobody planned on the pandemic. Our clients did. Nobody planned on supply chain wave 1, wave 2, wave 3. Our clients did. So we model all that stuff in that environment. So that's how we're able to teach board of directors and C-level executives of how to prepare and to keep their companies in survival mode and hopefully thrive mode as well. It's a very different world in business, and the pandemic showed people that. So that's what we do. That's where you can go for more information.
All right. So I feel like as we conclude, I should hear the James Bond music in the background. Do, 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 do.
It kind of is. It's sad. It's sad, but it's where we are. It's
all right. Well,
anyway,
thank you. Thank you. And that concludes today's episode of our podcast, Restoring Trust and Enriching Significant Relationships, The Trust Doctor. And make sure you like, subscribe, comment, and share this podcast because, wow, if you weren't blown away and you need to just take a breath, I don't know what I have for you going down the road. All righty. Till next time. Bye.
Thanks for having me, Patty.
Once again, we've concluded another great episode of The Trust Doctor with Dr. Patty Ann. Tune in next week for more insights and advice on how you can create, nurture, and sustain healthy relationships. To find out more about the podcast, visit drpattyann.com/podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, and share. Until next time.